Originally released back in 2008 as part of the very successful Core 2 lineup, the Core 2 Duo e8400 is the CPU of choice today. So guys, let's go ahead and start off with our motherboard. We got a P5K Pro. Moving on to our next set of hardware, we have 8GB of DDR2 RAM, and last but not least, we can't forget about the GPU, and in this case that is going to be the RX 580. Anyways guys, just a quick little heads up, we have the CPU overclocked itself to about 4 GHz via the FSB, and we have 6 very recent titles to test out today. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on to our first title today, and that is going to be Deep Rock Galactic. I previously tested this out in the Core 2 Quad video and a few other videos, and it's a very fun title, and one that I think deserves a test when it comes to old hardware, because it's pretty new, I guess you could say. It just came out about a year ago on Early Access. There is consistent updates, and it performs pretty well. When it comes to these older and weaker CPUs, it's not much of a problem to run it, honestly. And that's a good thing. Even when this crazy horse, the slowdown isn't that bad. The overall experience is pretty playable, as you can see by the average. The 1% and 0.1% were pretty bad, but that's going to be a very common trend throughout the video, which you're going to see pretty soon. The overall experience, I mean, there was a bit of a stutter once in a while, a bit of a long pause freeze, I guess you could say. But overall, hey, if Deep Rock Galactic, I'd say it's pretty playable. Moving on to another title that was released about a year ago that still gets pretty consistent updates, that is going to be Sea of Thieves, and another game that I consider not exactly the smoothest experience, but still pretty playable. The 1% and 0.1% were pretty abysmal, like really bad, and that's going to be that's going to impede your gameplay, let me tell you that much. If you're sailing the seas, you will have a freeze once in a while, so let's say you're fighting somebody and you're off on your ship traveling something, you know, somewhere, and all of a sudden you're about to get next to him or something, and there's a long freeze, and the freezes can be pretty long on the CPU, I've noticed. That could definitely ruin your gameplay, but overall, if you just want to have a fun time with your friends and just chill, it's not going to be that much of an issue. Thankfully, there was no problem running the game at all or starting it up. In the first place, that is not exactly the case in, well, all the games I tried out. I did try out Odyssey and Apex Legends. Those would not work. They are missing a CPU instruction set. Well, they're not missing it. The CPU itself is missing it, and that I believe is SSE 4.1 or 4.2. So without that instruction set, which I believe is missing on the Core 2 lineup and the Phenoms as well, it was first introduced with the Core I lineup, so yeah, I believe some Core 2 quads might have also had it, but overall, you're not going to be able to run in those games when it comes to using the CPU. So let's go and move on to our next title today. Our third title is going to be Vermintide. In fact, the second Vermintide, the sequel to the first Vermintide. That's why it has a 2 next to it, obviously. Right? Yeah. Anyways, how was it? How well did it perform? Well, the overall performance was pretty good. Actually, no, it wasn't that good. What am I saying? The actual performance was okay. I guess it was very manageable, you could say. I couldn't get MSI Afterburner hook within the game itself, but taking the numbers from the benchmark that I got, which doesn't include the 1% or 0.1%, so you're going to have to do that separately. You could use something like Fraps or MSI Afterburner to record those, and that's usually how I do it. But overall, the actual performance when you're in game is somewhat manageable, I guess you could say. You could definitely play the game. There is going to be a scenario that will be coming up pretty soon that I'm going to show you. When there's a large amount of enemies on the screen, there is a big slowdown that occurs. Not exactly a slideshow, but it is going to be a scenario that can happen pretty often in the game and can cause some trouble if you're on a CPU like this. As you can see right here, we have a massive horde of enemies coming toward us, and the game has slowed to a crawl. It definitely feels like it's maybe in slow-mo, but it's definitely going a lot worse than it was previously. It's not a slideshow, it's still manageable, you can still see where you're doing and see where you're going, but a great experience, I don't know if I would say that exactly. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on to a very popular game, one that I always get comments about, and one that I feel like I have to include in most videos because, well, people like watching it, which is good for views, but it's also good for you guys, because a lot of people play Fortnite. In fact, I'd say a good chunk of my comments actually have to do with can I run Fortnite. Surprisingly, not any comments about Apex Legends yet, but I'm sure those will be coming pretty soon. Also, if you're wondering, what's up with the colors? I don't have to be Radon Relive. Radon Relive seems to have an issue, and it seems to have that issue for the past month or so, where I can't exactly figure out what's wrong with it, but it looks like red and blue are reversed. They swapped. And that causes a very weird thing where your guy looks like a Smurf, and lava looks blue, which means the lava got hotter somehow. Also, the cannon physics are very interesting to watch in this game, but hey, wait, hold on a second, we gotta talk about performance here. How well did it perform? Well, for Battle Royale games, surprisingly performed pretty well. You would think Battle Royale games with 100 people on the map would actually be very CPU intense, but as I've seen through Fortnite, that's not exactly the case all the time. Once again, 1% and 0.1% are terrible, and you know, we're not even going to talk about that anymore, because they're pretty bad. But the general experience, even with those being pretty terrible, is, honestly, I could play the game. Could I do a great job against somebody with a 240Hz monitor? I have no idea, probably not, but hey, Is it playable? I guess you could say that. Anyways, let's move on to something that actually was very playable. And that in this case is the indie title Slime Rancher. It was just recently free on the Epic Store, so I said, hey, why not? Let's test it out. I played through it on my Xbox, and I just recently picked it up on PC, and in fact, the first playthrough I did of it, well, I was on the Core 2 Duo. My experience was pretty good. I mean, I run a high-end rig with an RX 2070 and a 2700X and 16 gigs of RAM, and honestly, playing on the Core 2 Duo wasn't that much of a problem. I mean, in some cases, trying to game on a system that's very low-end is a problem, but when it comes to these indie titles, oftentimes you won't even notice that much of a difference if you're on a 60Hz monitor. A higher hertz monitor, obviously, you're going to want more frames, and you will notice a difference, but if you're on 60, which a good chunk of people, I'd say the majority are, then you're not going to notice much of an issue at all when it comes to playing titles like this. And I'm sure many people who do actually have these CPUs tend to stick to indie games such as this, so that's always a good thing. Anyways, guys, let's go ahead and move on to our last game today, and that is going to be City Skyline. It was recently free to play on Steam, so I decided why not? Let's give it a try. It is a very CPU intensive game, and not exactly in this case right here, we only have 300 people, but as you can see, it's already having a bit of an issue with the frame rate. It's not exactly very smooth, and the game was set to pretty much like low or medium settings, and there has a bit of trouble going on. I know a lot of very high-end processors can get very, very quickly slowed down by this game. So if you're running something like a Core 2 Duo, also excuse the gameplay, it's going to be absolutely terrible. I just decided to go and mess around as much as I could in the game as quickly as I could, and this is the result. And anyone who's ever played this game is probably looking and saying, oh my god, what am I witnessing? You're witnessing pretty bad gameplay. That's what you're doing. Overall, though, if you're playing any kind of simulation game like this, I can't exactly speak for all of them. It's probably not going to do too well, especially ones that are very CPU intense, which a good chunk of very modern ones are. And I can tell you right now, with 328 people, it's already slowing down pretty quick. Could you imagine a city with 100,000 people? This thing would be crawling. I don't even know if a lot of i7s can probably even do that, you know? You have probably an issue. You need a pretty high overclock CPU for this kind of stuff. So yeah, can you do something like City Skyline? Well, if you stick to a single tile, and your population never grows because they're all infertile, then yeah, it'd probably be a very decent experience. Anyways, guys, let's go ahead and move on to the final part of the video. And also a big thank you so far for watching. If you made it this far, thank you very much. I do really appreciate the support. There's been plenty of likes, there's plenty of views, and there's been plenty of comments. Feel free to comment at any time you want. If you have any questions, any criticism as well, I'm always up to criticism, why not? I mean, honestly, plenty of criticism actually helped me improve the channel in many ways, which is good. And I think the big thing about this channel is I constantly want to keep improving, so yeah, anything you want to tell me, just leave it down in the comments down below. I'm always willing to reply, and anything else you have to say, hey, I'll try to apply as best as I could, as long as YouTube tells me that message exists. Sometimes I have to rewatch the video to actually find comments, and that's not exactly fun. Something YouTube could actually work on. And a bunch of other stuff it could work on. Yeah, overall, let's actually go ahead and conclude my thoughts on the actual CPU itself. You know, I mean, for the most part, the conclusions are in many ways my opinions. I mean, for some people, this is going to be absolutely unplayable, and for some people, it's going to be perfectly fine. Let's be honest, some people, if it's not 120 FPS with a 120Hz monitor or 240Hz monitor, it's not really the smoothest experience in the world, but for other people, they could be playing at 14 FPS, something like Mountain Blade or something, and be perfectly fine with that. So personally, from my experience, I've used low-end gear when I was a young kid. I've played on plenty of low-end computers. I mean, I had a 6150 SE for a while when I was a kid. That thing was terrible. Half-Life 2 lagged, and that was like 2010 or something like that. That was pretty bad. Not being able to run Half-Life 2 in 2010. That was an interesting experience. But anyways, for my experience with all those old computers and my very high-end computers, which I've owned plenty of, I've had i7s, I've had the 780s, 680s, all that stuff, right? I'd say it's a very unique experience to still be able to play these games on such an old hardware. It's still very much manageable, I guess you could say. If you're going to be doing stuff, basic stuff in Windows at least, you're going to have no problem at all. Watching something like YouTube or something is not going to be an issue. Opening up multiple programs or doing something very intense, if you're doing some editing, that's probably going to become an issue. It's going to be much slower. Streaming or using OBS in general when it comes to recording is going to be a very big problem with a low-end CPU like this. You're going to want to stick to using your GPU to record. Not exactly always the best option, but I mean, hey, you got to do what you got to do, right? Moving on to stuff like casual gaming, such as Fortnite or very easy games to run. I mean, it's surprisingly, a lot of these casual games are going to run fairly well and to the point where they'll be playable. And if you're just looking to play some PC games with your friends or have a friend that only has a Core 2 Duo and it's like, hey, I can't even play this, well, as long as you got a decent GPU or at least something that can somewhat run the game, I don't think the CPU is going to be that much of an issue. Now when it comes to actual, like, real gaming, let's actually get into the, you know, I mean, most people, when they buy a gaming PC, they want to play the newest titles, and they want to play them at a very high frame rate, very smooth experience. That's not something you're going to get, and that's pretty obvious with old hardware like this. I mean, a lot of people will conclude it's not that good in 2019. It's good in the sense that you can actually run stuff, very basic stuff, very easily, but in the sense of providing a outstanding experience where you're gaming, you're playing the newest titles, absolutely not. It's just not something you're going to do. A lot of dual cores are going to be limited in that aspect, even pretty modern ones, but the Core 2 Duo, well, it's got quite a bit of an age on it, so there's that. But overall, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I do have the Phenom anniversary for the 2 years that I have had this channel coming up pretty soon, so watch out for that. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching, and have a good day.